Now it's time to pledge the allegiance. If you'd stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Once again, I want to thank all of you for being here and attending today's networking program. And as I mentioned, we're very pleased to welcome home Congressman Hastings, who's going to present the State at the District Address in a little bit. Growing a community or growing a business requires strong leadership, energy, and enthusiasm. In today's address, Congressman Hastings will tell us a little bit about how the district is doing, how we fared, and what's going on in terms of issues and opportunities that lie ahead. Our sponsor for today's breakfast is UBS Financial Services. Please visit their table at the back of the room when you have an opportunity to learn more about this dynamic financial services country. I want to thank all of you and ask all of you at the UBS table if you please take a stand so we can recognize you and thank you with our applause. I'd now like to introduce Lori Matson. Lori is our membership director, and she's also going to introduce our new members and give us a little update on what's hot and what's going on in the city. So please come on up and join me, Lori.
Today I just wanted to take a minute to talk about our golf tournament. We have filled all of our afternoon foursomes and we've opened a morning session to accommodate additional golfers. The tournament is scheduled for Friday, September 7th at Canyon Lakes Golf Course, so it's just 2.5 weeks away. I want to thank and recognize the many businesses that are helping to make this tournament a success. We have our premier sponsor is Levy Thompson Financial Planners. Each golfer will receive a golf shirt, compliments of Kennewick General Hospital and Windermere Real Estate. You'll also receive a towel, thanks to Bank Real. Arrive early and you can practice on the driving range, thanks to Cadillac Medical Center. And you'll have the opportunity to win lots of cash and wine on number 12, thanks to Harvey Monteith Insurance, our hole-in-one sponsor. The beverage carts will be out in full force and are being sponsored by the Bonefish Grill and CH2M Hill. You'll also have a tasty lunch provided by Joe Peterson Insurance. Every golfer will have a golf cart equipped with GPS, thanks to Lord's Health Network. For those of you that may need a little extra help, that GPS is handy. You might need a little extra help. We'll have game bags where you can purchase mulligans and string provided by XO Communications. When the tournament is over, join us in the tent for team and individual prizes sponsored by Tide Light while enjoying a delicious steak and salmon dinner thanks to Willie Stewart of Remax. Our ambassadors and staff have been busy gathering lots of raffle prizes and items for your goodie bags. So doesn't that sound like a great way to spend a Friday? We're still hoping to have a putting green sponsor and one more beverage cart sponsor. So if you're interested in being part of the fun and getting exposure for your business, please contact me right away so we can get you signed up. We're taking team and individual registrations through next Wednesday, August 29th. So on your tables are forms. Please take one today and get your team signed up or an individual golfer if you'd like. The weather in September is always beautiful and the tournament season is winding down, so please join us for a day of golf on Friday, September 7th. And then now we'd like to introduce our new members. If you'd please come forward, we have a number here today which symbolize how our community is growing one business at a time. So come forward and receive your plaque from Ed. We have Rick Corson, the Benton County Coroner. We have Coach Shannon Spencer. Her business is Coach. She's Shannon Spencer, Coach Shannon Spencer. She's not a football coach. Maybe she's a golf coach and you guys could use her. We have Betty Hubbard of Computer Science Corporation and Larry Haler, State Representative. So please join me in welcoming these new chambers members. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. I just have one question about that GPS system. Will that help track the balls themselves? I usually know where I am. It's my ball that I'm confused about. You know, one of the benefits that we have of these networking breakfasts or networking luncheons is, in fact, the opportunity to network. So I'd like to ask you now to take your business cards out, and we're going to spend the next 5 minutes networking. So please take this opportunity to visit with the people at the tables next to you and introduce yourselves. Thank you. Thank you. You know, working collaboratively on regional issues has long been a priority for our chamber. Having elected officials who strive to work collaboratively on key national issues and key regional issues is also very important to us. Today, one of those leaders is with us. Congressman Doc Hastings is here to deliver the state of the 4th Congressional District and to discuss the past year and the opportunities that lie ahead. Now, I know Congressman Hastings needs no introduction in this district, but there are some things that we may want to be reminded of. Congressman Hastings was first elected to the U.S. House in 1995 and serves right now as the 3rd ranking Republican on the prestigious and important House Rules Committee. He also serves as the ranking Republican on the House Committee on the Standards of Official Conduct and is the founder and chairman of the House Bipartisan Nuclear Cleanup Caucus and serves on the Northwest Energy Caucus, the Western Caucus, and the Rural Caucus. Congressman Hastings also knows what it takes to run a small business. He ran Columbia Basin Paper and Supply, the family-owned business, for 27 years. He attended Columbia Basin College and Central Washington University. Doc and his wife Claire reside in Pasco and have 3 grown children. Congressman Hastings, we look forward to your address. Please welcome Congressman Doc Hastings. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. You want this?
Well, thank you very much, Ed. It certainly is a pleasure for me to come back again for the, I had frankly lost count, the 5th year to talk about the state of the district, but it is a pleasure to be here. I'm a bit disappointed that Ed didn't follow up with one more very important item when he was introducing me in regards to my bio. It's true I have a wife, it's true I have 3 kids, but it's also true that I have 6 grandkids and 1 on the way. And so I wanted to make that known, Ed. So, but it is a pleasure. It is a pleasure to be here, and I will have to say, if the topic of my speech, which it is about the state of the 4th Congressional District, which, as you know, runs from the Columbia River up to Brewster in central Washington, and roughly Othello, Moses Lake to the Cascade Crest on the west. And I have to tell you very generally that the state of the 4th District is very, very good as I see it. What I would like to do, however, is talk about some of the issues that are important and of particular interest to us here in the southern part of the 4th District, and obviously if there are questions on other areas, I'd be more than happy to respond. Let me talk by saying that we are an area in transition. We are an area in transition from the standpoint that the Hanford Reservation had for a long time a role in the defense of our country, and we are in a transition, as we have been for the last 17 years, to a new era. And right now that transition focuses on cleaning up the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. And I have to say, from my perspective, especially when I compare it to when I was first elected and sworn in 1995, what has happened at Hanford in the cleanup has been, I think, very, very good. And let me just talk about some of those things. Let me put it in a perspective of what it was like when I was first elected. When I was first elected, there was really no guidelines, no path forward, if you will, no determination as to when Hanford would be cleaned up. Also, there was really no plans how to deal with some of the real difficult issues out at Hanford. Now, as we come forward here 12 years later, I think there's been remarkable success. And just recently, as you know, the Department of Energy finally feel confident enough, got their arms around the vitrification plant, that project is going forward. And it is very important to go forward because of the magnitude of the waste that we have in our underground tanks and the potential negative aspect that could have on our surrounding area as it relates to the environment. I have to say that as I stand here today, Secretary Bodman, when he first visited Hanford several years ago, and by the way, he spent a whole day here, which was more time than any Secretary of Energy in my service in Congress had spent at Hanford cumulative. And we had a long conversation during the course of that day, and he felt very, very strongly that he wanted to get his arms around this so that the department in the future would not be criticized for missing their estimations about how much these projects are going to cost. I was frankly critical of the department because they didn't come forward, I thought, in a more timely time period with their path forward, but they did. And now the project is moving forward. And I think as long as the department does their job here, the Office of River Protection, the contractors do their job, and certainly the workforce that we have out here do their job, then I think we will see some real projects as it relates to the cleaning up in Hanford. Now, my focus thus far, when I talk about Hanford, has been on the Office of River Protection. We tend to overlook the other site out at Hanford that deals with the River Corridor Project, and that one has, I think, shown a great deal of success because, again, referring back to when I was first elected, there was no particular plan for it and what to do with the K-basins. Now the K-basins are completely cleaned up and all that waste is moved up to the Central Plateau. And then just recently, to tie in with the River Corridor contract, what was announced earlier this month as it relates to PNNL. And we all know, because PNNL has been here now for over 40 years, 45, is it 45 years I think now? Mike, yeah, 45 years. And we know that as we go forward, PNNL is going to be an integral part of our future. And part of the challenge that we have with the River Corridor contract and the facilities that PNNL had at the 300 area was try to make that transition from the 300 area so that could be taken down and new facilities built for PNNL. That finally came to a head and a conclusion just a couple of weeks ago. And I think that is extremely, extremely good news. So all of these things are coming together, and all that remains really is for those that are in charge to do precisely what they are supposed to do. And I think that those entities that I have mentioned have been very, very successful. PNNL, and I was very pleased to have been able to work with them through this process, but I have to say this, they are one of the unique national labs. And I think that's a credit to what they do for our community. Because not only do they do work for our federal government, but they also do work for outside entities. They are a very big player, for example, in Homeland Security, just to give that one aspect. I know that's government work, but nevertheless, they're a big player in that. So as all of these things come together, I feel very, very good about the state of where we are right now. All that needs to be done now is to continue positive work that's been done in the future. Now, I know that we all know there's going to be some glitches here and there, and we will deal with them on a case-by-case basis. But overall, it is certainly much, much better from my point of view than it was when I was first elected. In that regard, let me talk then about what maybe some of the things we should do here to expand our influence, if you will, across our immediate area, but even beyond that. Those of us that have lived here virtually all our life, and I've lived here with the exception of a short time since 1947, like this place. I mean, you can't beat the weather year-round. It's a great place to live. You're close to activities, over 300 days of sunshine. You can't beat that. But one thing that we are missing, and one thing I think that we need to look at, and I say this to groups here that are representative of the business community, is we need to look in areas of expanding our horizon as it relates to tourism. I could probably talk to Visitor and Convention Bureau about this. But let me say it in this context, because what has happened in Hanford because of that transition away from defense production, Now, Hanford doesn't require all that security that was there before. I recently sent a letter to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, who now have responsibility over the Hanford Reach and managing the Hanford Reach. By the way, in interest of full disclosure, I want to say that I was an opponent of designating the Hanford Reach a national monument. But that's not going to go away. We have to deal with it. And so what I believe, and in the content of my letter to Fish and Wildlife, was that we ought to open the Hanford Reach as much as we possibly can to those that want to enjoy the river from the standpoint of boating and so forth. But the first issue that I stated to them that I thought that they ought to look at was to relook at access to the top of Rattlesnake Mountain. How many people here in the audience have been on top of Rattlesnake? All right, not bad, but there should be more. Now, I just want to ask all of you, and you can nod or if I'm wrong, criticize me, but isn't that a fantastic view from up there? It is. And that is being lost, and there's no reason now, from my point of view, for us not to have some sort of very reasonable access to the top of Rattlesnake Mountain, because you can see all the rivers from up there. There's no security risks now on the site, at least as I speak here today. That may change over time, but there's no security risks on the site. But more importantly, we know that there is an interest on what went on at Hanford simply by the interest of Tri-Cityans and others that want to go out and see the B reactor. Now, if you have that much interest in seeing the B reactor, you can imagine if you expanded that from a site on top of Rattlesnake Mountain so we could all enjoy the view. So I would just invite you. TRIDEC has had conversations with TRIDEC on this issue, and I know there's interest there. I would just invite all of you to think about it in those terms. I might say that just last week Rattlesnake burned, as you all know. It's all black now. It'll be black for a couple of years, I'm sure. But I believe, and I was told that perhaps that fire could have been contained a little bit better had there been better access up the side of Rattlesnake Mountain. And I think we need to take that in a standpoint from a public safety standpoint also, because whenever there's a fire there, it's always a threat to our area, more particularly Benton City. So, as I view where we are now, I think we need to really look ahead, look at new vistas that we haven't looked at, and perhaps try to capitalize on that. Now, let me talk about some national issues, because there are national trends that will affect us positively and negatively. This is the first time that I will have addressed you today as a member of the minority party in the U.S. Congress. The elections last fall were really a profound election from the standpoint that the majority changed in the House of Representatives. Democrats control the House, and they control the U.S. Senate. The elections were pretty much status quo. They were pretty much status quo in the western part of the United States, but there were some massive changes in the eastern part of the United States, and since we're a national government, we have to respond to that. But I want to tell you that there are consequences to elections, because there is a difference in philosophies of the governing parties, and I just want to tell you my interpretation of that. We will obviously make determinations as Americans a year from November when we elect a new president, and all members of the U.S. House will be up for a re-election, and 1/3 of the Senate. That's the way we do things in our country. But there are profound differences, and let me talk about two areas. There's been a lot of talk lately about renewing a program that was put in place 10 years ago. It's called the SCHIP programs, which is an acronym for State Children Insurance Plan. SCHIP, I'm sorry, I left out the H, Health Insurance Plan. It was designed 10 years ago on a bipartisan basis. President Clinton was in the White House, and both houses of Congress were controlled by the Republicans, so it was a bipartisan effort. And it was designed essentially to take federal funds and block grant them back to the states to develop programs that would cover children that were otherwise uncovered by Medicaid and other programs that are available to those in need of health care. And frankly, the program, with some exceptions in some states in the eastern part of the United States, has been a success. But here is where the consequences come in. I voted for that program in 1997, and I would vote for reauthorization of that in its present form today. But the bill that came out of the U.S. House was profoundly different, and I think this ought to be part of the debate next year in a presidential election. because the bill that came out of the House of Representatives greatly expanded government-run health care. What do I mean by that? The S-CHIP program, as I said, was essentially a block grant program that goes back to the individual states. But in the House, the Democrats added Medicare proposals to that that dramatically changed the way we deliver health care. We have the best health care in the world. We hear that over and over. But yet there are proponents that believe we ought to have universal mandated government-run health care. I view the passage of S-CHIPs in its current form as a step in that direction. Why do I say that? Because there is a provision in that bill that would affect a major hospital in this district for one reason, and that reason is that it is physician-owned. And I'm talking about the Wenatchee Valley Clinic up in Wenatchee. It was founded in 1940 by 3 physicians. It is now governed, it is now run by, or owned by 150 physicians. It employs 1,500 people. It's essentially a hospital, but it's owned by physicians. There was a provision in the Medicare part of that S-CHIP bill that I discovered at 1 a.m. in the morning when we were in the Rules Committee. Because we were given a heads up about this provision, but we didn't see the language until 1 a.m. when I was in the Rules Committee. And sure enough, the provision said that those hospitals that are owned by physicians within 2 years have to dramatically change their makeup or they will not be reimbursed by taking care of Medicare patients. Now this is a hospital in Wenatchee that serves 250,000 population in north central Washington, employs 1,500 people. A big part of its revenue comes from Medicare, and we by a policy, not me, but at least the majority of votes in the House, by a policy said that those people that are serviced by Wenatchee Valley Clinic cannot be served because of one reason. They are owned by physicians. Now I think that is terrible to make conditions on how we are to deliver health care in our country. So I raised obviously a stink about that. In fact, I attempted to offer an amendment. I was denied even an opportunity to offer an amendment on the floor to take that provision out. So the provision, that bill did pass the House without my support. The President, fortunately, has threatened to veto that bill. The Senate has passed a different version, which is a reauthorization of S-CHIP, but only S-CHIP, but yet it greatly expands it. The President said he would veto that. Now, the problem is that this has to be worked out by September 30th, and it's going to be a real challenge when we go back in September to work it out. But let me just offer this observation in addition. I think that probably in the times that I've had the opportunity to speak to you, I have spoken about what I believe is the best way to deliver health care. And I think the best way to deliver health care in our country is to allow consumers, if you will, patients to make more decisions on their own as to how they want to get health care. You can do that with individual policies. We passed health savings accounts, and if any of you businesses are looking at that, if you haven't looked at that, I invite you to look at that because that empowers individuals to look at their health care. But if that is the future, in contrast to more greater government-run health care, then this S-CHIP proposal goes dramatically against that. In fact, there is a provision in this bill, again, the House bill, that in order to pay for the expansion of S-CHIP and Medicare, taxes puts a tax levy on individual, or not individual, but on health insurance plans. And we all know that there's a standard saying in government, if you want more of something, you subsidize it. If you want less of it, you tax it. Now, if we want to expand health care in the private sector, why would you put a tax on private policies? So, I just say that because I hope this becomes part of the debate next year. We had this debate about 14 years ago on a national level, and I think the American people said, you know, we would rather make our own decisions rather than having a universal health care plan. But one of the consequences of the election, then, is the fact that this is moving forward, at least out of the House. The second issue I want to talk to in that regards, and I mentioned this at least in passing, that the state of the 4th Congressional District is very good. Every place I go, the economy is strong. It's certainly strong here, but I dare say that there's not one place within the 4th District that is not pretty much national average, and that is frankly very unusual. It's unusual because we are an agriculture-based economy here in Central Washington. Agriculture is by far the biggest part of our economy. And yet, when you measure the success of the economy, at least by unemployment rates, we are slightly higher than a national average, but that's not unusual because an agriculture area tends to always run a little bit higher because of seasonality of the workforce. But our unemployment rate in Yakima is probably the most heavily impacted agriculture city, and even Yakima's unemployment rate is only slightly above 5%. And we all know that the economists say that full employment is at 5%. So I think it's pretty remarkable as to where we are. And I think one of the main reasons, and this is another, what I'm going to get to is another consequence of elections, and I think one of the main reasons for that was the tax cuts that we put in place in 2001 and 2003. And the simple premise behind that was simply to allow the American people to keep more of the money that they earn to invest as they see fit, but also to allow American businesses to expense their capital investments on a much quicker basis. And I think that is very, very important when you have an information age like we have where essentially technology is outdated in 6 to 9 months. And if you can expense that off in a short period of time, then you're going to have more investment, and therefore our economy is going to grow. Well, just those taxes that I mentioned, and including the death tax, unfortunately, when they were passed in 2001 and 2003, had an expiration date of 2010. Why is that? The reason why in both those years, 2001 and 2003, was because of a Senate rule when you what we call score revenues into the future. It didn't meet the Senate rules, and so we had to put an expiration date on it. Now, I can tell you, from my perspective, my intent was for those taxes to be made permanent all the way down the line. Well, we're getting closer and closer to 2010, and they haven't been made permanent. Why is this important, then, as we move forward, and as to the change in ownership, if you will, in the House and the Senate? Probably the most important document that a Congress passes is their budget. Now, the budget in the Senate is unlike what it is on the City Council, even different than what it is on the state level, and certainly on the county level. On the federal level, a budget is simply agreement between the House and the Senate. The President has no say on that. And it's a blueprint. It talks about how much spending is going to be without allocating it down to specific areas. And it talks about the revenues in the future. In the Democrats' budget document, which is a 5-year document, taking us beyond 2010, when those tax rates will go back up, they make no mention whatsoever of making those tax cuts permanent, which means in its current form, we could all have a massive tax increase by 2010 or sooner. The death tax would go back up to the 55%. The marriage penalty would go away. The child tax credit would go away. Even the sales tax deductibility that we enjoy in Washington State because we haven't got a state income tax, that could go away. Now, obviously, I'm going to work very hard to make sure that those tax cuts are made permanent. But I just wanted to tell you, when you look at the blueprint as to what you're thinking in the long term, those tax cuts are not going away. Now, we can only speculate. If we could all see in the future to 2020, we could make profound observations and probably do very well. But if history is any gauge, and we know, because there's been several times in our country where we have reduced the tax on American people and the economy has grown, and here we are in the first decade of the 21st century, that we have in fact seen that. And that is at risk right now. So I say that then about the consequences of elections. Obviously, I hope this will be part of the debate in the presidential election next year. It ought to be, so Americans can make the proper choices. And finally, let me talk about one other issue, and we'll open up to questions, and that's the issue of the Iraqi war. You should know how I approach this in the larger sense. I believe the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan is part of a larger war against the radical Islamists. Make no bones about it, there is a faction, a radical faction of one of the great religions, that has one idea in mind, and that's to bring down the Western way of life. This is going to be an effort that's going to go on, in my view, for several generations, and it's going to be very, very difficult. We had signs of this happening well, as a matter of fact, this really started probably in the 20s, but the first sign probably internationally happened when the Shah of Iran collapsed in the late 70s, and members of our embassy were taken hostage, as you know, for over a year. That probably should have been a wake-up call, but we didn't respond as we should have in time. Another wake-up call happened when our Marines were bombed in Beirut in the early 80s. We probably should have taken hard on that, and we didn't respond as much. We had 2 embassies in Africa that were attacked, all by the same radical Islamists in a different form or another, and we didn't take probably issue as much as we should have then, until 9/11/2001. And now I think, and what I hear when I have town hall meetings throughout this district, and certainly with communication with constituents, I think America is finally waking up, or in the process, I should say, of waking up to what this threat is. And I certainly have been monitoring. In fact, before I came home after we broke at the end of August, I spent a week in Israel, because that is, they are really surrounded in that part of the world by what is going on. So what we are waiting for then, the U.S. Congress, is a report that was mandated by Congress to be delivered to the Congress by General Petraeus as to what the status, tactical status and so forth is of our troops on the ground, specifically in Iraq. We're all waiting for that. I don't think it would do good to speculate one way or the other at this point. I think there'll be plenty of time to make comments after General Petraeus's report. But I just wanted to let you know that how I view all of this in the larger sense. We've been very, very fortunate in our country to not be subjected to, on a regular basis, aggression against us here on our home soil. We had it 6 years ago. I certainly hope it doesn't happen again, but in all likelihood there may be another attack someplace in our country, and we need to be aware that these things are not something that just happens spontaneously. They're more than likely our planned attacks, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to be wary of that as we move forward. So with that, let me close by going back to what I started to say earlier. I think when you look at the state of the 4th District as we are right now, I think it's very good. I think particularly the state of where we are here in the southern part of the 4th District is also very, very good. And with that, thank you very much for having me, and if you have any questions, I know that I'll be more than happy to try to respond. Ed, I don't know how much time we have, but I'm sure you will tell me if I... Great, very good. So with that, anybody have any questions? I'll be more than happy to respond.
With the collapse of the immigration reform bill, certain proposals are coming out, two proposals that have really hurt the 4th District, or I think some of the employers in the 4th District. Some of them come out here out of the Republican Party. What's your view?
The question is with the collapse of, I'll see if I characterize this right, Gary. With the collapse of the immigration reform effort in the Senate, how is that going to affect us here in Central Washington? Is that a fair assessment of that? Okay. First of all, I was and continue to be a proponent of a comprehensive immigration bill. That has collapsed. I don't believe there will be a comprehensive plan until after the presidential election. In fact, I think this will be part of the debate next year in the presidential election. But my focus as this bill, or as this issue was still alive in the Congress, was focused very specifically on our agriculture industry. As you know, Washington State is a leading producer of apples. They're also a leading producer of hops. We're one of the leading producer of grapes, whether you're talking about wine grapes or Concord grapes or other varieties. We're one of the leading producers of asparagus in the country, even though that acreage has declined. And there are other, obviously we're much more diverse than that. But the one characteristic, at least of those 4 crops that I mentioned, is that they are all labor intensive. Every one of them are labor intensive. And historically, those crops have always been worked by a migrant labor force. We've never had a labor force here year-round to continually work those crops. So I believed, and I was very much focused on ensuring that the comprehensive bill would have a guest worker provision in it so people could come into this country for a period of time and go back home to their mother country. At no time did I support, nor would I support, that a guest worker would have an automatic path to citizenship. If they want to be a citizen of this country, that's perfectly fine, but she would have to go through the regular process. Unfortunately, that effort failed, as you know. Now, what I've also discovered in working this issue for the last several years is that there are very few districts in the country like this district whose economy is so dependent, especially labor-intensive agriculture, so dependent as this one is. California has several districts like that. There may be one or two in Arizona, maybe a couple, if that many in Texas and in Florida. In other words, the universe is really pretty small where you have that profound impact on the economy as our labor-intensive agriculture. Why do I say that? Because when you're in a political arena, you're always looking at where the votes are, and there are not a whole lot of votes for that particular point of view. So, however, having said that, I have been in conversations before we broke last July with members on the other side of the aisle in the House saying, okay, what happens if we have a later short? Because I've been talking to people for some time on this. And we on a regular basis are monitoring the industry to tell us what their labor situation is. We're getting really heavy now into apple harvest right now and going into next month and a half. So if there is, in all of these areas that I'd mentioned, a profound labor shortage, there is a chance. I'm going to say it, though, very specifically, a very small chance that you could pass some sort of a guest worker bill in order to take care of this so you wouldn't repeat that next year. I know there's an effort going on in the Senate. I'm involved in discussions on the House side if that should happen, but frankly we won't know until probably the middle to the end of September to respond to that. If that happens, and if we don't get relief in this long term, though, we really are putting our labor-intensive agriculture at risk, and we need to be aware of that. Yes. Why don't you stand up?
With the elections coming up, do you think the issue of dam breaching will rear its ugly head?
The question was, with the elections come up, do I think the issue of dam breaching will come up? I was hopeful that the issue of dam breaching would go by the wayside for a whole variety of reasons. But I have to tell you, right after, again, this is part of the consequences of elections. Right after the election, in fact, 8 days after the election last November, there was a group in Washington, D.C. that had a news conference supposedly coming up with brand new statistics as to why taking out the 4 dams on the lower Snake River would be a good idea. Now, I know they did that because Speaker Nancy Pelosi was a sponsor of the bill in the past of bills to breach the dam. So the short answer to your question is no, this issue will probably not go away. But I do have to tell you at least some positive aspects about it. The prime sponsor of all of the efforts in the past to breach the dams on the Snake River is a congressman from Seattle. In the bill that he introduced this year, he had one other sponsor from the Northwest. So there's only 2 sponsors from the Northwest. Over half the sponsors of the bill, or nearly half the sponsors of the bill, are from east of the Mississippi. So this issue is not something that, it's an emotional issue for, I think, the extreme environmental community across this country, and they will continue to put pressure on this. It's not an issue, I think it's an issue that if we could deal with it wholly within the Northwest, it would probably go away in time. But this issue will always be alive by the extreme environmental national groups, and I think the evidence of that is the co-sponsors of this legislation. To date, that legislation, in conversations I've had on a bipartisan basis, that legislation is not going anywhere. Besides, if it were, I'm convinced President Bush would veto it. But it's not going anywhere, but the issue will always be alive, I'll tell you that. Yes.
I was curious with the bridge collapse and steam tunnels blowing up in the streets of New York. What are the prospects for some changes in infrastructure?
The question is, with the bridge collapse and the steam tunnel incident, what's the prospects of probably more funding or more response to that? Is that a fair way to say that question? I believe that it's something that I hadn't thought about, frankly, too much until that bridge collapse. And on the federal level, we don't have a capital budget, for example. that probably should set aside for infrastructure. Point number one. But point number two, when a lot of the national highways and so forth were put together, and this goes back some 50 years, as we all know, there was an expectation at that point that the maintenance would be done by the individual states. Now, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just simply saying that that's kind of the world we live in, and the infrastructure that we have in this country obviously needs to be on a regular basis studied and looked at and made sure that it's maintained. But I think the federal government needs to be much more aggressive as to how they approach their responsibilities in that regard. But I do think that local entities, whether you're talking about local governments or state government, needs to be involved in that also. Yeah, Bill.
Congressman, thanks for all you've done for us back in D.C. Is there any hope of stopping this insanity of global warming? I see here in my own state that last year, your report, they took a vote that decided that hydropower is non-renewable. It's just not a renewable resource. But it all has to focus, it seems like, on this global warming nonsense. Is there any hope that that's going to go away and come back to some sanity? I see a report was released yesterday or day before yesterday from some scientists, including some of our own University of Washington scientists, that are really saying this isn't quite the way it's being portrayed. What's the future?
The question is on the issue of global warming, and to shorten the question down, will it go away, and maybe what's the response to that? Is that a fair way to characterize that in the short term? No, I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, and the reason I don't think it's going to go away is because when you look at the data over time, yeah, the Earth has warmed. I think what needs to be answered, however, in the long run is that a natural phenomena, or is it a phenomena that's being created by man? And I read some recent statistics that there has been some change in what the hottest decades, at least in the last 100 years, have been, and where that data pointed towards the most warm times were in the late 1900s. In fact, the hottest time with the revised data was in the 1930s. That was hardly a time when we had the economy we have right now. I do believe, though, in that regard, that it probably makes pretty good sense for America to try to diversify our energy portfolio, if that is the culprit of this. I'm a strong proponent, obviously, of hydropower. I mean, it is ludicrous to say that hydro is not renewable, but it just doesn't make any sense. But in many respects, this debate is being driven again by some people that are on the extreme. I'm a big proponent of nuclear power. If we're worried about atmospheric emissions, why don't we invest long-term in nuclear power and get rid of some other things? But there are efforts going to look at turning coal into gasoline with the clean technologies. And I think that makes perfectly good sense to move in that area. But I don't think that we should be making decisions where we don't know all of the data and where we are singled out, like the Kyoto Accords were several years ago, where we were singled out and others were exempt from whatever rules and regulations would control emissions. I think that makes terrible sense. But I think we should continue to work in this country to try to expand our energy portfolio. And I don't have any problem looking at all of the different areas that are non-polluting. But I think that whatever we do needs to be based on very, very good science that can be proven. And there clearly are issues on both sides of this.
One more?
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate being here.
Thank you and welcome home. I want to recognize you at this opportunity and just really thank you again for all you do, not just today, but for all you do in the district and the sacrifices you and the other elected officials make. Thank you. And now it's time for our drawing. Lori, if you'd come up and handle the drawing. We have a bottle of wine, thanks to Baker Boyer Bank, and some roses from Just Roses.
A few things, actually.
Oh, we do.
Yep, let's mix. We do. We have a bottle of wine from Baker Boyer Bank, and that goes to Cindy Reisenauer from HBA. Do you want to come? There you go. And we have a gift certificate to Monteroso's Restaurant donated by Statewide Publishing. George Seacott, the Seacott Law Firm. Are you still here, George? There you are, way down the corner. Okay. He gets the, there you go. Thank you. And we have a bottle of wine donated by Terra Blanca. Did you pull yours out? Did you put yours in here again?
I did put mine in there, but I didn't get it yet.
Sherry Lankin at Sterling Savings Bank. Are you still here? Okay. It's the Terra Blanca wine right there. We have a gift certificate donated by Hampton Inn for a jacuzzi suite. That goes to Andrea Thornburg of the UPS store. That's that one right down there. Okay, and lastly we have the bouquet of roses donated by Just Roses.
Those are out.
Those lucky people. Jean Jelke of the American Red Cross. Congratulations. Thanks to these businesses for donating these items.
I just want to remind you that our next membership meeting is September 26th at the Columbia Center Red Lion. And the subject of that will be the state of health care in the Tri-Cities in our area. And I also just want to take this opportunity before we finish up for today to thank the Chamber staff, not only for the work they've done putting this together today, but during our transition period when we were waiting for Mel to get here, our Chamber staff and your Chamber staff really did yeoman's work. They really put in the time and the hours and held this together. And I just want to take this opportunity at this luncheon to thank them and ask you to join me in giving them a round of applause. And with that, I remind you to be seen, be noticed, be heard, and it's always good business to do business with Chamber members. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all later.